Hello, and welcome to Borrow My Belief podcast, which is designed to inspire you to live from your heart. And today I've got Richard, who's a good friend of mine, and I'm really excited for this conversation we're about to have. Something that I've been listening to and learning about for about a year now, and I'm very confident that you're going to enjoy what Richard's got to say here. So welcome, Richard.
Thank you.
So, where do we start? I think if I think of all the people that I know and this whole subject of living from your heart, I quite possibly have learnt the most from you. So, my belief and perception is that you have been very dedicated to learning about living from the heart for quite a while. So I think maybe we'll start with where that started with you.
Yeah, I suppose feeding into that, what I realised is that I knew that my life wasn't going the way I wanted it to go. And I didn't know how I wanted it to go, but I knew how I didn't want it to go. And that's how it was going. So I kind of started off from like, okay, so I don't know necessarily exactly what it is that I'm supposed to, where that fulfillment is, but I know this isn't it.
Yeah.
So then where do I start from with that? And that inevitably was a very painful place to begin, and I knew that I needed to start changing the environment around me. And the most painful one was, my was leaving home.
Yeah. So there's going to be people watching this who are going to resonate with that.
Yeah.
And both you and I have took those leaps of faith. And I know from myself, it took me a while to work up to that, and I just knew deep inside. What did it look like for you?
Car crash. I always say that if I don't, if I had the chance to do it again, I don't know if I'd have the energy, but I would, anyway, it gets complicated, but it was really, really uncomfortable for a very long time. And, without going too far down that rabbit hole, I think in that process, what I remember, what I started with actually was with an affirmation. Really, there's this one sort of paragraph that I memorized that I would just say to myself over and over again when I was anxious or afraid, and I would just I decided that I remember I was doing martial arts, and the trainer said, look, all you need to do is 5 minutes a day, and that's enough to be, or whatever, it was 10 minutes a day. And I was just like, right, I'm going to take that martial art approach to this. So I'm going to do that affirmation with all of my heart 10 minutes a day, and I'm going to learn it off by heart, and I'm going to just say it over and over again as I need to. And whatever develops out of that, I'm going to take that. This is my training now. I'm going into a dojo of sorts, and I'm just going to go and do martial arts, you've got to get to the teacher and you've got to get to the lesson, and you miss a lesson and you do it once a week. This was going to be my life.
Yeah.
And I was going to take that passion and drive into every moment of it, because it was just, I had to.
Yeah.
And I could. And it just felt like I could make sense of it there. So I just became very devoted to taking that journey.
There's a couple of things that you said there, because I've had a similar journey, but not the same, in that if I looked back to 6 years ago, and 6 years ago the version of me knew what was coming, she probably wouldn't have done it.
Let's be honest. Yeah.
And the version of me now that looks back is grateful for every single second, because it shaped me into who I am. So it's kind of a double-edged sword, really.
Paradox.
Yeah. And can you tell me what your mantra was?
It's just funny because every time I can say it in my head a million times a day, but when I go to say it outside, it sometimes in infinite opportunities are all around me. I open my eyes and behold a treasure house of infinity that lies within me. There's a gold mine within me from which I extract everything I need in order to live life gloriously, joyously, and abundantly. Whatever I want, I draw forth, for I am an abundant man. I'm a magnetized man. I'm full of confidence. I'm full of strength. I'm born to win. I'm born to succeed. I bring into my life more power, more wealth, more health, more happiness, and more joy. I release the hidden power of my subconscious mind, and my life will be grander, greater, richer, and more noble than ever before. Within my subconscious depths lies infinite wisdom, infinite power, and an infinite supply of all that is necessary. I recognize my greater potential, the infinite intelligence of the universe runs through me. I will have everything I need at every moment of time and point of space. And it goes on and on and on. You know, probably take up most of the podcast, but there's a few more lines to it. Yeah.
Is that your affirmation?
I cobbled it together from some book I was reading about changing the mindset.
Yeah.
And then as I would develop it more and more, I would then bring intention to it. So really speaking it with intention. So noticing the breath in my chest and the movement of my lips as I was speaking the words, and really just it got to a point where I said it so many times that I would actually notice when I was feeling anxious by the fact that I was starting to run it in my head. And I was like, oh wait, why am I saying this? Something's going on around me. So I really thousands and that. I mean, that's 2018. We're 225. So yeah, said it a lot, and I still say it today. So yeah, I'm slowly becoming a confirmation, which is nice.
I think I want a copy of that, the completed copy.
With pleasure.
Because we're only going to get part from there.
yeah, I'm going to go on for the whole thing.
So you stepped off on this journey that you knew, I would say, deep in your heart, soul, I don't know what words you would use, that needed to be taken.
Yeah.
You were fearful of it.
Yeah.
And I know quite a lot happened in that journey. So, and then it's led you to developing something that you're naming signal science. And I've learned quite a lot about this. It's really intriguing. So tell me, or tell the viewers a little bit about your journey that's led you to that.
Yeah, it's a great one actually. So it all started with a question, and I one of my ways of giving is I have an organisation called Echo Mingling, and Echo Mingling is there to bring people together over shared beliefs and common values, as you know, and it runs through a lot of different things that I do. And through that work, I got asked if I wanted to be involved in a campaign in Israel at the time, and they said, well, in order your interview will be a question, and your answer to the question will be your interview, and on that basis, the strength of that answer will decide whether we want to bring you on board to the project. And the question too really was massive for me. And when he asked me this question, it just light bulbs went off. You know, people talk about inner illumination. Something stirred in me that was so great that it began a healing journey. And the seeking the answer to that question led me to begin traveling around the world. I went to South America. I was in Greece. I was in Egypt. I was in sacred sites around the UK and even in Israel. And that process led me to signal science. And then what happened at one point was my son was going into the army, and I was really like, okay, be a medic, be an engineer. He's like, no, Dad, I want to go to combat. I was like, oh, okay, I can't interfere with your choices, but I've just learned all of this stuff. I felt that if I could impart it to Ben, I would give him the best chance of, being sovereign to himself and being protected on a really deep level by the universe. And so I offered it to him and said, Ben, would you be interested in learning this program? Because if I teach it to you, it will help me to understand it more deeply, and I'd really like to share it with you. And fortunately, Ben, of his own accord said, yeah, all right, I'm interested, let's do it. And so that was then the Dragonfly program for him. and that led into signal science.
And what was the question that you were asked?
Great question. Okay, so the question was in three parts.
Mm-hmm.
And the first part of the question was, do you think that there's one thing? So there's lots of things gone wrong in the world. There's issues with, agriculture, education, politics, mental health, the environment, whatever. We could list them off for hours. Do you think there's one point of penetration? Do you think there's one thing that could be done that could ripple out and have a positive effect on all of them? So that was the first part of the question. The second part of the question was obviously, what is the answer to that? Now, you have $100 million. What are you going to do on day one, and what will you achieve by the end of the first year? And I mean, even today, asking you this question, I think 4 years after I was originally asked it, it still makes the hairs stand up on the back of my neck. It inspired me because I knew that somewhere in me was an answer to that question. And actually, funny enough, I didn't really. I just took. My divorce had just settled, and I had a little bit of money behind me, and I was just like, you know what? I don't need to give you the answer to this question. I'm going to go and explore it for myself. That I'm going to become like an Indiana Jones of this, and go on this treasure hunt to find what that answer could be. And that's that was the interesting beginning of signal science, because seeking that was what gave me this gift.
Okay, so signal science, it's got so many elements to it. Where do we start?
Yes.
We're going to explain it.
Yeah,
You're going to explain. I know you've tried to. I know you've tried to explain it on numerous occasions.
Yes, and to simplify it, I think has always been the quest. I really wanted the idea is so. The first thing I would say is that signal science is just a new way of looking at something. It's a perspective. It's inclusive. So it doesn't supersede any other modalities. It includes everything. So that and really what it's based around is conatus. And conatus is this really interesting word that nobody seems to know. And conatus is your innate inclination to want to extend and enhance your own life. So as human beings, we don't like pain, and we move away from pain, and we move towards pleasure. So it's life's longing for itself is another way I describe it. And the simple idea behind signal science is, rather than saying, oh, hey, I've got healing for you, like I can heal you, or I can give you treatments that will heal you. It's like, no, like that doesn't tie in with my experience. Healing can't come from outside in, it can come from inside out, and it can be held by people. But what my healing is and what your healing is as unique as our DNA. And so how can we better understand what the individual needs and empower them to heal themselves? So don't come to me on a direct debit or a standing order where you need me to let me give you a gift that will let that healing unfold in you in the best, simplest, easiest way possible. And so signal science was on the premise that yes, we do exist in a physical world, but actually we all know that we are magnetic beings as well. We know that the earth is magnetic. Birds use the magnetic field. Dolphins use the magnetic field. Whales use the magnetic field. We know that we can measure the electricity of the heart and the brain and other parts of the body now. And that electric field comes with a magnetic field. And so the aura around us, the energy field around us, comes as a consequence of that electricity. And so that magnetic field, that energy field, is in everything. And so would it be possible to take a human being on a journey so that they could begin to interact with that field through their body rather than through their mind? And so starting to remove the rendering of the physical world and say, well, everything is energy. So and how am I interacting with that energy? But to give it a sequence of steps that made it pragmatic and not etheric, which is what a lot of it is nowadays. So it's just another way of explaining a very ancient wisdom, really.
So, okay. So what I'm understanding from what I'm listening to you is that the question that you were given led you to kind of experiment on yourself.
Yes.
Motivated by the fact that your son was going into a situation and you wanted to help him as well. And I know that you've methodically practiced this yourself as well.
Yeah.
So, and also myself intuitively, without all the information that you've got, I intuitively understand this, but I can't put words to it.
Feel drawn to it.
Yes.
Yeah.
So what I've noticed recently in my own journey, just to explain what my own journey was, my journey started off with emotion and mastering as much as I could emotion and understanding emotion. And that lasted about 4 years to understand that, and then moved on to the mind, the thoughts in the mind, and understanding that's not who I am. And then now I'm about to enter into the physical. I used to be really horrible to my body in that I was addicted to exercise excessively. I'm about to move into this arena. And what I've noticed is that my body knows everything, way far and above the mind. So to give people an example, these days when I have a decision to make, I feel into my body first, and straight away I seem to know. It's took a while to get to this place, but straight away these days I know, oh right, okay, I'm not going to go there at the moment because my body's telling me not to. So what about you in this journey? Because I know that you have been very disciplined. I know that you practice breath work as well. What have you done so far with regards to this, and what have you found?
Yeah, so it was I guess the answer to that would be, how did I come out of my mind and into my body? And when I was in my body, how was I able to connect with it on a deep enough level of sensitivity that I could be guided by it? So the mind is a very, we're very top heavy. We interpret everything through our minds, and the mind is a tool of the body. It's actually a tool of the heart, in my opinion. Everything senses. Signal science is, the heart is your Iron Man, kind of, that superhero character. There is a power source here that sits forward of the brain. This is our most front-facing, and has more nerve endings than the brain. Can process information like the brain. There's the Heart Maths Institute now, which you can look at. They've done loads of research about the power of the heart. So signal science is about sort of activating the heart. Essentially, is really what it will boil down to. But in terms of answering the question specifically, what was it again?
What have you done so far in your journey? Because we're going to go more into it. We've got information here to show me before this podcast. But what has your journey led you to do physically yourself to show that? Because you're at a point now where you really want to pay forward. You want to show other people what you've discovered yourself in your own life. So what is it that you've done yourself, I guess physically and practically, to lead you on this path, to show you now that you're ready to pay this forward and show people what's possible?
So the first thing was my core, was building up my core strength, internal core strength, changing. I think water is a panacea. And I think what I would say to people, step one is change your water.
Let's stop there, right? Because let's talk about that and then move on. Water. I was really surprised to find out that we're in the UK. People will be watching this in other countries. That tap water is not good for you, and neither is bottled water.
Bottled water is the worst.
Yeah. So what can people do?
Well, I always think, I kind of I think always go with the best that you can.
Yeah.
So yeah, like if I'm thirsty and I can only get bottled water, then of course I'm going to drink bottled water, but I'm used it to an absolute minimum. So what can people do? First is education. So explore and learn about water. The first element is that a lot of the things that they're putting into tap water, well, as I understand it, water isn't supposed to be a conduit. It's there to regulate our system, our temperature, and to flush out the system on one level. There's a metaphysical level to it as well, but on the practical physical level, it's not supposed to be used to bring things into the body. We get all of those nutrients from plants and from the food we eat, and there are other ways to bring that into the body. It doesn't need to be through water. So a lot of those things that they're putting into the water, the body can't absorb through the water anyway. And so that it's calcifying inside the body. So it calcifies around the glands and affects the way the glands work. So really, you want to always go for the purest water you can. Number one, there's different, there's lots of conversation, but you have to, part of what signal science says is that everybody is an individual. And actually, what each person needs is very unique. But for me, the best type of water I have is I don't have champagne water. I think I have the finest water, and that's a mixture of 50%, 60% distilled water.
Yeah.
So I use a distiller, and the idea with the distiller is that actually, because the water heats up and the steam comes up, everything that's in it has to stay down. Only the water molecules can rise clean, like the rain from the heavens as such. And then what comes out is very pure water with nothing in it. But I like to add some. Here we're very blessed in living in Glastonbury. I have the spring water here, and some of it I think is copper, iron based, and the rest is sulfur.
I'm not sure about the other side.
Yeah, I think it's like a chalky.
Yeah.
So I have a tiny bit of iron in it, and some of the sulfur, I believe it is, and then I add ions to it and hawthorn, and it's infused in rose quartz.
So we do live in Glastonbury, so I'm really excited that I can get my water.
Yeah.
And I did live in Scotland before that, and I had to drive to get a well. But as you know, I did a 3-day water cleanse. And when I did that 3-day water cleanse, I came out the other side of it, and I looked in the mirror, and my eyes were so sparkly and bright. They kind of looked like alien eyes.
Water's massive. Yeah, it's huge.
And I think I told you within a couple of days of just going back to normal and eating normal, my eyes were bloodshot.
Yeah.
So that, for me, convinced me about water.
There's also reverse osmosis, which some people are very big fans of, which is a bit more complicated in terms of putting a system into the home. If not reverse osmosis, then there's copper, which you can put water in and leave it in, and changes the structure of water. And then by degrees, whatever you can get, but really tap water is it's not good.
No.
It's just
fluoride. They put fluoride in it.
Yeah, which is great if you're at the dentist, but I just don't think it's good for us in our water. Yeah, there's obviously that's a topic in itself.
It is. So water. You started off with water.
Water, and then I realised that really the focal point of signal science is around the autonomic nervous system. So it's a way of assisting people and supporting people to bring their nervous system into equilibrium. And what we find today is that most people, there's lots of different levels of it. If you're in a war-torn country and you're having people shoot at you, then that's one set of it registers in one particular way on the nervous system. But if you've been abused mentally, physically, socially, whatever it might be, that also has an impact on the nervous system. Abuse from parents or a partner or whatever it might be puts the nervous system out of kill. And when that nervous system is out of kill, the whole system that we're driving, the whole body doesn't work properly, and the mind doesn't function properly, and you're less compassionate and you're less patient, and you're less able to make sort of better long-term decisions. So for me, then once I understood, I've got a record going on here. I'm not being nice to myself. I caught myself once in the mirror. I was like, wait, what was that? Like, why would you say that to yourself? I would never say that to a friend if they were in trouble. Why would I say it to myself? And this longing to kind of hold myself better.
Mm-hmm.
Like, why would I be mean to me? It's me, you know? So where was that coming from? And in all, you know, the other side to that was that never to be, nothing's ever urgent. You know, the way it was an ex-girlfriend of mine that put it to me, she said, look, unless someone's in an ambulance on their way to the hospital with a severe injury, nothing's urgent. You can always sleep on it, you know. And so it's like, okay, well, how do I get my body how do I prime myself so that I can calm everything right down and stay there as long as possible? And most importantly, what happens from that? So water, calming the nervous system through breath work would help me to begin to investigate internally. And then it became, as someone put recently, like stepping stones in the mist. My own inner illumination would then lead me step by step into what became signal science.
So I know you're a big fan of breathwork,
Mm-hmm.
and me too. So some of the people watching this won't even know what breathwork is.
Mm.
So what would you say about breathwork?
Well, the main thing about breathwork is that it helps to regulate the system. So another key concept behind signal science, if it comes out this way, is that calmness is is paramount. And so then what are the ways to become calm? And we live in a world where everything's 24/7 now, you know, more and more so now that AI is off the mark and we're going to have all of this sort of new technology rolling out, which is great. I don't believe everything in moderation. But what it means is that there was a time where we had Sunday here in England, and on Sunday everything would stop.
Mm-hmm.
There was no bank manager going to call you on a Sunday. Work wasn't going to contact you on a Sunday. Shops weren't open on a Sunday. You would go and sing with the community, maybe you would be around family and friends, you would have a lunch, but you would, most importantly, you would pause. Once every 7 days, you would pause. And in that pause, if you can then work to bring the calm, then you can hear your inner guide, your intuition, your inner tutor. And so breath work was a way to begin putting that pause in on my day. I found that most of my anxiety would come first thing in the morning.
Mm.
I would just wake up in abject fear. I realized at one point I was afraid of life by that stage. I'd been so battered, and it was like, what's going to go wrong today? You know what? And it was hard. It was heavy. I couldn't get up, and some days I just couldn't get out of bed. Just couldn't get out of bed. On my 40th birthday, I remember just crying because I was just like, what the? This isn't how it was supposed to be. Like, and I didn't know where to go from there. So when I realized, when I made this commitment, and when I did start to build my core, change my water, and I got into the first element of yoga, that led me to the next thing, which was, okay, mornings are really difficult for you. I need a morning practice because some days I just don't want to get out of bed. It's just too heavy. And I know I need to get out of bed because the day generally would end a bit better than it would started, you know. And there was no option to quit. I wasn't quitting. I did think about it, you know. Suicide did cross my mind a couple of times, you know. I would never have followed it through. I did think about it, you know. So I was like, okay, no, I've got to get out of bed. And so I knew that I would, you know, first thing was just whatever it took to get myself out of bed. And then I figured that, okay, that point where I'm still in this sort of twilight zone is a good time to do breath work. So I can just stop the mind for a little bit, because my mind would work up racing in all these patterns of fear and what I needed to do and rush, 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 or do. And I wanted to go in the opposite direction because I knew that what signal science was calling me to do was to do the opposite. So whenever I felt to rush forward, I had to ease backwards in exact proportion. So if it was me really agitated and full of anxiety and triggered, go to bed. If it, whatever it was, I had to match it with the reverse speed, you know. So I would start off by slowing right down and trust, you know, really trust that if I did that, what the next step that would be revealed to me in that day would be the right step. And so guided morning breathwork sessions really help me to start tuning out of my mind and into myself so that I could then intuitively start to understand what I needed to do next.
Always amazes me how similar our stories are. So I really relate to the mornings, and I have clients, and I've had clients that have found the mornings the most difficult. And for me, I couldn't get out of bed before midday at times. I just physically couldn't do it. And the tools I used were meditation, just simple meditation. But by the time you and I started to converse more and talk to one another, you actually brought this pause to my life. So I was through the morning bit, but still very kind of hyper. And you brought this pause to my life in a weekly practice, and the calm, and just that simple once a week, because you brought it with intention. You gave me like a to-do list on how to do it. I still do it. How long ago is it? May you brought that to my life. That has actually changed my life. And this thing that you always say to me, if you think you're going slow, go even slower. And we're not, that's not what we're taught in this society, is it? It's certainly not where I've come from. I've been taught to be high and corporate and done all these types of things. I've been taught to drive and drive and drive and drive, and I still find myself sometimes doing that. And it's always the pause and the calm that brings the information and everything that I need. So do you want to talk a little bit about the pause that you taught me and why you find it so important?
So another factor for signal science was that in order, so how would you pragmatically, how do you get someone to pick up a signal inside of their body? Like, what is that signal? How would I know that I'd picked it up? And what I realized, so I was born in London, went to school I was kind of born in sort of Ladbroke Grove way, and went to school in England. But I was really, my father was born in the Sudan, raised in Israel. My mum was English. And so a large part of my childhood was growing up in Israel. And in Israel, it's really hectic. You can see now, no less so. The Middle East generally is hectic. But what they had there was the Sabbath. And it made an impact on me from quite a young age, because what would happen is, in a country where the energy is just frenetic, suddenly Friday afternoon would roll around and everything would just go. So it wasn't just one person pausing, it was the whole neighborhood. It was, large parts of the country, and energetically you would feel it. Everything would just stop. Friday afternoon, people would kind of generally be on the beach or whatever, and then Friday night, everyone would go home and shower, and the men would go off to the service in the synagogue and sing together, and then come home and you would eat a meal together and you would sing together and you would be grateful for the food and you would say prayers that were just gratitude, really. And then on Saturday morning you would get up and go back to synagogue and walk there and walk back and have that time with my family, and then again lunch, and so as I kind of came to Glastonbury, and I started to realize about the benefit of the pause and slowing down, and I realized, wow, it doesn't have to be a religious affair, but the Sabbath really worked for me. Like, I liked that idea, and I thought, okay, so slow down in the week. So if life is like this constant spin, just you're in this spin all of the time, all the time, at this point in the week, that spin would stop. And in that pause, I would then reflect and be grateful for what happened in the week before. Just take a moment. What happened this week? What am I grateful for this week? And take a moment to feel into that, and then to have a nice meal, on different plates, wear different clothes. Like, step out of the 9 to 5, constant 24 9 to 5, let's call it. Wear something different, eat something different, eat from different plates, eat in a different place, just change everything up. And And then I would go to bed and meditate a little bit before I went to bed, and then wake up in the morning. And for me, Saturday service then became about a deep kind of breath church. So I would, do a investigate how deep can I go into my breathing, because when you do your breathing it's uncomfortable, because either I'm thinking, well, I want to eat something, and I just want to get up and go and eat something, or I need to go and do this, or I need to go do that. And no, stay, just give yourself permission, stay. So Saturday morning became an opportunity to really play with that. So I'm going to give myself permission to do this for 2 hours this morning, 3 hours this morning, 4 hours this morning, and explore what happens when I take that inner journey, and then I would follow that with some dynamic breath flow. So another thing that for me was body movement and qigong and tai chi and kundalini yoga, and that fusion of those three into what I call dynamic breath flow. So to do that, to now firstly come out of the mind. I would rest my digestive system. So Friday night I wouldn't eat past sort of 7 o'clock, so my tummy would have a time to just slow down, not be processing food. Go into this deep meditation, and then when I came out, celebrate. Have my favorite kind of brunch. Cook up something really good, and sing, learn something. Go for a walk in nature, go to my favourite coffee place. Can I mention them?
You can mention them if you want.
Right? Yes, so in Glastonbury, and I would love to just go there and have a coffee at the bar. Coffee is a thing that I do like. I believe
they make a good coffee.
They do. I'm working on everything, but I do believe we live a physical life, and some treats are good. Coffee is my treat. So, and then as you come out of it, to say, okay, well, now I'm going to set intentions for the week ahead. And so then it comes back, well, what happens in that space? And then if you can bring someone in and invite someone in and say, hey, okay, so you're interested in this? All right, let me listen to you first. Who are you? What do you need? What's your astrological read? What energy readings can I get from you? What can I find out about you? When do you eat? How do you eat? When do you sleep? How do you sleep? Let me build up a 360 of you, energetically, physically, emotionally, so that I can invite you into a space to give you that pause in the best possible environment for you, so that you stand the greatest chance of picking up that signal. Because once that signal comes in, once you connect with it just once you can quieten everything down, the interference from the mind and the body and day-to-day life, just enough for that signal to find itself, it will keep looking for itself. And then you're off. And then you support them.
So here's what I'm hearing, right? So first of all, I'm going to take a drink of this.
Yes, we have to talk about nutrition.
Diet is part of it as well. There's so much to it. I'm going to actually have a drink.
Fine.
It's really nice. So diet is a part of it, but here's what I'm hearing. The signal is your own signal within, which might be described as intuition.
Yes. Yeah.
And some people might describe this signal as God, the universe, divine source.
76 different names for the same thing, maybe. Yeah.
So it's your connection to all that is, and it's individual to each person. I know you can correct me. It's individual to each person, and once you reach that signal, you are then guided to what's best for you, what's next in your life, and it's led from the heart.
One step at a time.
Yes, in the presence, in the now. I mean, this is the way that I live. I think about 70% of the time now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but it's explaining it to people.
Yeah, well, you've got to experience. Life is an experience. You've actually got to experience it.
And it doesn't always make sense. So, for example, just give some examples, because there'll be people listening to this in a corporate job. They've been in that corporate job for years. It might feel like a money trap to them. They're yearning for something different, and it's all been about the grind and graft, and don't understand this. So I'll give an example from my life this year, which you watched me go through, which wasn't easy, right? So I intuitively felt to leave my job and come and live in Glastonbury, but it didn't make any sense whatsoever on a should I say physical level? It didn't make any sense.
Mental
level. It didn't make any, that's perfect. It didn't make any sense financially. No sense at all, but
mentally,
yeah.
It didn't seem to make sense to you.
But intuitively from my heart, it made absolute sense. So I handed my notice in because I've been living like this for quite a while now. And then I had a whole triggered moment and a meltdown. And I tried to reverse that and suffered because they didn't let me retract my notice. I tried to retract my notice. And then eventually, so that was, I handed my notice in the beginning of June last year, and we're now recording this at the end of January. And now can look back and see how much sense that made, what beauty that brought to my life, why I did it. I got to spend 10 weeks with my grandson, who's now gone traveling with his mum. And had I not intuitively done that, I would have never experienced. There's so much. I could do a whole podcast on what I experienced since then. So it didn't make sense, but it made absolute sense. So as I understand it, that is an element of signal science right there.
Yeah, really good, Joe. Yeah, you feel so intrusive. Yeah, exactly. So signal science is saying, look, you can't put it into words.
Yeah.
Let's step out of words for a minute. Let's step into a world where we're not trying to describe it.
Yeah.
So, which is hard for people to get their head around. This is just about feeling. So this is a coding, this is a system to help you interact with everything in the physical world, but through a way of doing it through how it feels intuitively, being able to connect to how it feels intuitively rather than how it reads mentally.
Because the mental is the conditioning, right?
Yeah, the gateway to the body, the gatekeeper, the barrier of entry is the mind. Because the mind, we're brought up to believe that the mind is the superior and everything is processed through the mind. But what if it's processed through the heart and the mind then becomes a tool of the heart? So when the mind is in flow, so when it's running at the right frequency, so we know we have gamma, delta, beta, theta, when it's running at the right amount of revolutions or thoughts per second, then it's in flow and then it can process much broader than when we have mental conditioning. So yeah, it's about signal science is about giving people tools, really pragmatic toolkit to help them to transition and to transcend the mind into a whole new space. And so what it does is it gives a cockpit to do that. But yes.
And I think it's something that fundamentally, it changed, going back to the original question that you were asked, change the world. In my life, it's given me fulfillment is the word that I'd use, peace. So, yeah. I mean, you never knew me 7 years ago, right? I don't think you'd come anywhere near me.
We never knew each other 7 years ago. Yeah,
if you think I'm hyper now, God, if you'd have met me all that time ago. Fulfillment is what it's given me.
Yeah.
And every day, I wake up now. So I've gone from waking up, and I haven't even explored half of what you've got here on paper that you've shown me. And I know I'm going to explore more. But every day now I wake up grateful. And if I wake up with any resemblance of emotion, which I did this morning, I now know what to do. I now know that I don't need to go. You talk about the nervous system. I had a traumatic event happen to me in March 2021. And I went into a fight or flight response that I don't think I came out of for at least 18 months. And if I'd have known, I mean, people might not understand what I'm talking about then. My nervous system was fired up. So I was acting from a triggered space for at least 18 months, not from a calm place.
Yeah, without even really knowing it.
I didn't even know. Yeah. And I do believe that until I was 49, from about 6 years old, I probably always was acting from that space.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know.
And as are many people. So nutrition, let's touch on nutrition. And then I want to talk about the metaphysical space.
Yeah.
So nutrition,
So nutrition. So we know we've talked a little bit about the mind, and if we try and imagine the body as a charging pack, a power pack, the two biggest energy drainers are the mind and the digestion. And in fact, a lot of people either suffer mentally or they suffer with their digestion anyway. And so one place where you have to reduce interference is in the mind, interference with the frequency, the signal, and the other is in the digestive system. So the process of signal science addresses nutrition as well, and actually what you find is that everybody has to eat what they have to eat. You can't tell anyone, no, you should eat, don't eat, because everybody's diet different. But the potential of food is great. So having firstly windows where you don't eat is really, I mean, I was eating 2 dinners a night. I was processing so high that I was consuming so much food and then just nervous energy burning it off. But one of the things that then was revealing to me in this process was, okay, I came across information about windows for eating, and so not to eat past a certain time, so that I could just. This is running a high processing energy, so if I could stop that for a little while and let it rest, so while I slept, instead of my body trying to digest foods which weren't even able to be processed a lot of the time. Let's be honest about some of the food that's out there. Certainly in the vegan world, processed within an inch of its life. A friend of mine took me to a vegan restaurant in Camden, an amazing pizza place, and I walked out and my tummy was in bits, and I was like, "Do you know, I've just eaten plasticine." It's bright colours and you can make it look like a pizza and look like pasta, but actually there's no nutrition in that food. So I went on I was really blessed to come across a wonderful woman with nutrition and did some work with her, that learned from her, and then started to pimp up my food. Like where I could, compassionately and kindly, just started to improve how I was eating. So what windows I ate in during the day, and again, some days you've got to have bucket days where things just go out the window. I don't believe in dogma. Even spirituality becomes sort of this thing we have to do. You don't have to do anything. Freedom is a very important component here. But generally, the quality of whole food and food that I was able to make, and how could I pimp it up? Like if I couldn't get access to the best of what I'd want nutritionally, well, how could I add value to what I was eating? So for example, what we have here, what we're drinking today is what I like to call the Dragon Mary, but this is fresh juice that I made the other day, which has got beetroot and carrot and apple and cucumber and ginger and organic turmeric, fresh organic turmeric and radishes and grapes, and then the fiber, instead of throwing it away, I keep it and use it to put back. You can cook with that fiber as well, make little vegetable patties and stuff. And then there's a green bean in there, and sometimes I might even put a little bit of fine chopped salad. But this idea of how much color can I bring into my plate or my drink, and how much of it is whole, and ideally, if I'm going for perfect, how much of it is from really close to where I live. So we don't just look at food and say, well, okay, what's the sell by date? We also look at food and say, well, what's how much nutrition is still in that food from when it was grown to when I've got it. So if I go out here into the garden here and I pick I don't know, a lettuce leaf. Well, it's come from the ground where I live. That has already an impact for my nutrition system. So I get more value for less consumption. Then I've only just picked it, so it's still live while I'm eating it. More value, less consumption. I eat less, and my body gets more nutrition for it. I pay less. This whole thing where food costs are massive at the minute. But once you start to run the body properly, you look at your body like you would look at a cockpit of a plane, or a dashboard of a car, and these dials come up, and you start to just look at how your dials are doing. You've run, not only do you get the benefit of the physical improvement and the emotional improvement and the spiritual and the metaphysical, but you also actually cost you less money to live, a lot less. So it's win-win.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because you know my journey with food. I've told you my journey with food. So when I'm being healthy, I buy from the farmers market here. We're fortunately enough we have that. I'm not spending that much money. I'm eating fresh food. I only need to eat once a day, and I'm full and I'm not hungry at all. And when I'm eating sugar with my sugar, which comes in the form of a box of chocolates a day, it's very, very expensive. Well, my favourite are New House, which are like £30 a box.
New House?
Yeah. You can only get them online or in Amsterdam Airport.
I want one. Yeah, okay.
So when I'm in the thralls of the sugar addiction, it costs me a lot of money because I like expensive chocolate. But not only that, I'm hungry all the time.
Right. So on one level, it's what's the quality of food that you're eating that will affect your power source, but also the nervous system. When we are frantic and frenetic, and when we are manic in whatever levels that is, when we are running in our sympathetic nervous system, and we're in fight flight, which people are in to different degrees, right? It's not just sympathetic and parasympathetic. There's a scale, you know. It's actually 360, because whether it's violent or whether it's, you know, life-threatening or just emotional, but also, so on the one hand, there's the quality of the food that you're putting in, and how the body processes it. But if I'm relaxed, my shoulders are dropped, I'm not tense, my mind is calm, so I'm not running at high revolutions per second of thoughts, you know. If my body and my environment are good, then I'm processing less power. I don't need as much power. I can glide through a little bit more. I don't need a jet thrust engine to power the mind and the digestive system. They start to run much more with much more energy efficiency. So there are two factors that affect that. So, and I'm the same now. I've noticed I used to get hangry. I was like, no, if I'm not eating, I'm like, that pissed me off. I was like, why am I not eating food? And what is this food? Like, you know, but now I'm noticing that, yeah, I can go with 1-2 meals a day.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Easily.
That started for me in Mexico. And I noticed I was eating really well. You can get good food out there really easily. Yeah. And lastly, there's so much we could talk about. I think we could make a podcast for a week. And I know I'm hoping that one day you're going to write a book, because I know keep looking at these notes that you've got here, and there's so much more to this. And I know you've got lots of voice notes. I know you've truly lived this. But I'm just going to ask you about one other thing, because it came up early in the conversation, and that's the metaphysical. So how would you describe that to people? Because I'll tell you why I'm asking this question. Because I worked in the dental industry for 30 years, and I can be a bit woo-woo and spiritual with my tarot cards and my crystals and all the rest of it. And in the dental industry, particularly in that profession, it's very science-based and very evidence-led. And I would myself have a little bit of frustration trying to explain all these. I think the way you've put it today actually would go down really well with, for example, a dentist. But I would have a bit of frustration trying to explain, actually, I'm going to tell you something that happened in my actual job. They did a personality test on me. And this was years and years ago. And in that personality test, it measured the level of intuition you used and the level of logic you used. And mine came out of using 900% intuition and zero knowledge. And I sat with this guy as he tried to explain to me that really I should be bringing some logic to my life. And I was getting really frustrated trying to explain to him, but my life's fabulous and I'm really successful and everything's going well and everything's right. And I'm one of the top performers in this company. Why do you want me to use more logic? And in the end, he actually just moved on to the next section because he couldn't convince me. And in the dental industry, I mean, don't get me wrong, I believe logic does come into it. I have made some pretty kind of out there decisions, but I come across people that I was trying to explain this to, that the heart, I can't remember how much more resonance the heart has than the mind. There is actually a number and it's been measured. When I try to explain metaphysics and how important it is, I've not done a very good job of getting that across. So I'm really interested in, to me, it's manifestation. I've written a book on manifestation. I'm really interested in how you describe it. Is that your body telling you don't want to talk?
It's just the way I'm saying it, maybe. How to pragmatically explain the woo-woo. We need moss.
Yeah.
I would say that we know, there have been lots of experiments done. First of all, let's establish some facts.
Yeah.
Personal experience. A friend of mine that I knew, his name was Brian, one day was rushed into hospital because they thought he was having a heart attack. And his heart was racing. But when the doctors got him into the examination room, they said something's not right here. Yes, your heart is beating fast, but the other symptoms of a heart attack aren't presenting. This is strange. This is odd. Anyway, long story short, what it turned out was his daughter was a parachute instructor. And at that moment, she had been doing a jump somewhere else in the country and her parachute had got caught. And they were able to see that the times where his supposed heart attack started was because he had tuned into her feelings.
Yeah.
So that's on one level, and that's someone I know, and this is not a made-up story. Now, there's lots of examples of that around the world. On a subtler level, we know there's a thing where sometimes you'll be thinking of someone and they'll call you.
Yeah.
Or and the list goes on. Okay, so without going into too many of them, let's at least establish that there's something goes on that we can't quite explain.
Yeah.
And so we know there's something there. Okay, now this is really, again, folding it back into signal science, is you can't understand, and a finite being can't contemplate the infinite. And we, for one reason or another, at the moment, we can't express that in words. We can hint at it, we can point to it. Some people are very good at kind of expressing it. You have to experience it. This whole life is about coming here to experience emotions. And what you said before about becoming a master of your emotions is what signal science really aims to do through the nervous system, through diet, through nutrition, through breathwork and things like that. But essentially, it's not something you can describe. That's the reality. It's only something you can feel. And one thing I would say here is that I believe all, or certainly I know when something feels right to me and when it feels wrong to me. And the less noise I have, the calmer I am, the clearer I am, the more perceptive I am about that. And so all you can do really is, by being more in that zone, is explore that as an individual.
I agree. Do you know, I wrote down, why would you dismiss it? It would be kind of insane to dismiss it, because through my own experience, the calmer I get, the more open I become, the more my heart opens, the more I meditate, the more I practice things like such as breathwork, yoga, the more unexplainable happens, or the more I notice.
Yeah, it's subtle.
The more I notice the synchronicities.
Yeah.
And then I can act on the synchronicities.
Another way of framing it is everyone gets to have a narrative. We're all running narratives. You know what? In my narrative, there's something out there that exists that supports me, that encourages, that is only for my greater good.
Yeah.
And the more calm I become, the more compassionate I become, the more giving I become, the more I can experience it, interact with it a little bit. And hey, like, great, if that helps to me to live a better, richer, successful, more embodied, my best life, then that's my story, you know. And if other people feel a connection to it, great, but I'm not going to push it on anyone.
So, Rich, I ask 2 questions at the end of every
You
podcast,
do?
but I have 4 things here. So the first one is, I can't remember the second one, but I will. The first one is, what is your life like now compared to when you realised what you said at the beginning of the podcast, that you had to do something?
Oh my God. It's more embodied, it's calmer, it's more giving, it's richer. I'm actually much better off than I was then. My connection with my son and my daughter is magical. Really, one of the absolute gifts of this whole process for me, tuning in, to be able to tune into them. I listen more. And yeah, I think I can't say that my life is free. I still wake up with, you know, certain days that are hard, and but I have better tools, and my each of my present moments is so much better. And then you look back and they stack up, you know, they do better.
Okay, so the second thing is, I really would love you to write a book, but obviously I can't make you write a book. But I want to ask you, if you do write a book and I come back to you, would you consider coming on this podcast again? Because I really want to read this book. So here's for the 2 questions I ask everybody. So the first question is, if you could go back to any moment in your life, and we've done this kind of thing before, and speak to a version of you at any moment, what would you offer? What wisdom would you offer that version of you?
Oh man, I guess I'd go back to me on day 1. Maybe day 5, maybe month 1. Can I go back a couple of times? I'd just be like, just keep, yeah, it's all right. Like, you're doing the right thing.
The day 1 of leaving home, is that what you're talking about?
This is, I mean, I think obviously I intuitively know them, but just to have me look back at myself with absolute conviction and calmness, just to say, you know what, you've got this, do this, you're going to be held, you're going to make the right decisions. It's going to feel uncomfortable, but that discomfort is your fuel, and it's going to bring you lots of gifts. And yeah, that would have been nice to have had that support.
I like that answer. I'll tell you why I like that answer. I was being mentored in Mexico, and the reason my book's called Borrow My Belief is because the woman, when she was teaching me how to market my services, she said, go back to a previous version of you, what would she have liked? And I said, just someone to hold her hand.
Yeah.
Because I did it alone.
Yeah.
And it sounds very similar, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And the last question is, out of everything that you've learned so far, if you had one piece of wisdom that you could pass on to anybody watching this now, just one piece, nothing else.
Yeah.
What piece of wisdom would you pass on? Balance.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that?
That, you know, that everything is about, you know, eat as well as you can, but it doesn't have to be perfect. You know, like, just be compassionate in a way is what balance is, because it's just saying that, you know, everything has a black and a white. There's a polarity in everything, and it's fine to be at either end at any point, emotionally, physically, whatever it might be. But just understand that there is a either end, and that ideally you just come back to balance,
temperance.
Yeah.
And that brings up, I've lived right over there in the spiritual world, and I've lived right over there in the corporate world, and both weren't healthy.
Moss said it nicely the other day. I mean, bring up someone's name that people don't necessarily know, but I'm sure you'll have
that's a friend of ours. Actually, should we see if we can get him on this podcast while he's here?
I would strongly recommend it. Yes, he's a very wise man, very authentic person, and Moss would say harmony.
Harmony, yes. harmony. Well, Rich, thanks for being on here.
Well, my pleasure.
And thank you, everybody, for listening.